Hey guys, we're back with Cory Hebert, Maindrive Cycles. Thanks for making the ride over today.
Thanks for having me, brother. It's an honor.
I think I saw a post you made recently. You've been doing this out of your garage since about 05. I think
2005, yeah.
24 bikes or so in total.
This was bike number 24.
Okay. I know you looks like you've done everything from like choppers, bobbers. There's that cool little like Kawasaki you did.
Yeah.
Kind of like walk us through how you got started and building bikes and kind of like your whole deal.
Sure. So I moved to Texas in '99, and it wasn't too long after that I got exposed to the world of custom motorcycles, honestly, through watching Motorcycle Mania with Jesse James.
Okay.
And when I saw that, I knew, because I should take a step back. I came from a sport bike background. Okay. So when I moved up here, I had like a Kawasaki ZX7R. That was my bike. But I was kind of getting tired of those bikes. There was only so much you could do to express yourself through a sport bike. And then when I saw Motorcycle Mania, I knew that custom bikes seemed very appealing to me. This is something I want to get into. So I found a shop near me in Lucas, Texas, which is where I live now, called Maindrive Cycle. And he was building custom bikes out of there. And I developed a relationship with him. I hired them to build a bike for me, a custom chopper. And through the process of them building the bike, I would go over, watch and learn, and realize there was nothing that they were doing that seemed like rocket science, okay? It seemed like just a basic set of skills that if I were to apply myself and if I had that kind of equipment, I could probably do that. So through the process of watching them build the bike, I started to gather tools and equipment. I bought a little MIG welder, a little tubing notcher, then I bought a TIG welder, and just went wild. Fabrication was something like, it really spoke to me. I started off making handlebars with my tubing bender, my tubing notcher, and my TIG welder. I'd come home from work from my day job as an engineer, go in the garage, make a set of handlebars, take pictures, put them on eBay, and then sell them and keep doing it over and over to fund all that equipment that I had bought. It paid for itself like in a very short time. So that's really how I got my start with fabrication, just watching my mentor, Mark, at Aardvark, and then just taking what I learned, taking that information back home, and just putting in my hours
going
over and
it.
over.
Yeah.
Heck yeah.
Nice. So what was the first bike you actually would you consider a legit build?
Well, they had built the first bike for me, and one thing that was like super frustrating for me was, I mean, the bike was amazing, but the part that really like killed me inside is that when I would take it places, people would always ask, "Hey, did you build that?" I'm like, "No, I didn't." And it was like, oh.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't really know how at the time. I was learning. I was growing. I was still a puppy, right? And eventually it got to the point where I developed enough confidence in my skills. I knew I was ready to start my first build. So by that time, my tastes had kind of evolved. I mean, tastes are constantly evolving. But the first bike that they had built for me was more of a long bike, kind of the billet chopper era. And my taste evolved after riding that bike for a few years. So I knew I was leaning more towards the old school, the vintage stuff. So the first bike that I built was more of a throwback to the old school. I had a kickstart, rigid frame, jockey shift, shovel head.
Nice.
But I got to express all that, all those skills that I had learned, all that creativity that I had been building up, I got to express it through that bike. And then once I built that bike, I knew I was onto something. I knew that this was not going to be just a one and done thing to where you build one bike and, okay, that's great. I knew I wanted to keep the process going over and over again. And through me building that bike and riding it to different bike nights and just making new friends, somebody else asked me, hey, can you build a bike for me? And then it just snowballs on to the next and the next. So to where here we are today. Now I have nothing to do with the custom chopper world. And now, it's just a constant evolution. So now here's where I am. And anyway, I feel like I'm right where I need to be.
Nice. Yeah. So like you said, you're here now. So kind of, I think I saw some of your posts where you got this initially. It was like a black FXRT.
Nope.
No? 2
different bikes.
Okay, different bike?
No,
right.
Yeah, this one is a collection of parts. My first FXR was the black 84 RT. Now that one for me was a little bit different from my other builds because that one was a restoration. That bike had been molested. Just like most of these FXR, Grady, you could speak to this. Most of the FXRs out there, they have been treated like garbage over the past 30, 40 years, however long they've been around. So you never know what you're going to get. I did know at the time I wanted an RT. So I became friends with FXR Mike in Fort Worth, and I told him, hey man, if you come across a good deal like on Marketplace or Craigslist, if you see a good deal for a used FXRT, let me know. And sure enough, he did. He found one in Tennessee.
Okay.
And I got a really good deal on it, but it was, we ended up meeting in Memphis. And when I got there and I saw it on the trailer, I was just completely, my heart sank because it was in a lot worse shape than the pictures lended itself. So anyway, I moved forward with the deal because it was still a good enough deal. I knew that I could still use this as a learning experience.
Okay.
I was going to do a complete restoration on this bike, like frame up, even have the motor rebuilt, everything. So it was still a wonderful experience, but it was the first time I actually did a restoration, and not like my past custom choppers where everything was hand fabricated. I made everything on the bikes before, from making exhaust pipes and seats and sissy bars and handlebars and etc. That first FXR, that 84 RT, was more of a restoration.
Okay.
But then once I was done with that 84, again, like I tell you, I'm ready to start another build.
Yeah.
You finish one build and you enjoy it for a while.
But you're immediately on the next
Oh
thing.
man, my creativity starts thinking, well, what could I do next? And then that's when I got exposed to that. Again, I'm not the first person to do a Milwaukee 8 FXR, but I saw the bike that Jeff Holt and Motor Witch had done in conjunction with FXR Division. Justin Coleman had done the fabrication work on it. And as soon as I saw that Milwaukee 8 FXR, it lit a spark in me again, where I knew I got to have one of those. Because it was the best of both worlds, right? You've got the vintage aesthetic, all the modern reliability, power, convenience, all of that in the same, all in one package. So to be able to combine those two worlds into one seemed very appealing to me. So that's when I knew I had to try one for myself.
I guess, so obviously you've done a lot to this, but what year did this start off as, like when you got it? Okay.
That's the type of question that I get at the gas station, and my response is usually, how much time do you have?
I've got a couple of batteries. I've got like several memory cards.
So it's a collection of parts, right? These were parts that were spread to the wind that I brought together to give a soul to again.
Okay.
The frame I bought from my buddy Brooks in Canton. This was actually a 94 FXRP windshield frame.
Okay.
So that was, that's obviously one of the key components. You got to get a good solid frame. And I got one from him. But then I knew I had to find a drivetrain. Like I told you, I found this drivetrain off of Facebook Marketplace out of Tennessee. This drivetrain actually came from a 2018 full-on Yeezer Glide. Ultra Limited or whatever they're called. So the ones with the water cooled. The lower fairings with the radiators or the coolant.
Okay.
Yeah, coolant reservoirs.
107 then? I guess
it's a 107. Okay. So I didn't want a water-cooled drivetrain. It presents some additional challenges, but I got such a good deal on this drivetrain.
Couldn't turn it down.
It was crazy good. So anyway, I bought it regardless. The challenge was, if you're going to put a water-cooled drivetrain into an air-cooled application, you have to change the heads. The oil pump's different. There's just a few things that you need to swap out. So I did those things. I I put the air-cooled heads. I bought a fueling cam chest kit.
Okay.
You know, so I actually put in the air-cooled oil pump with the cam plate.
Okay.
I put a fueling cam in there, a 465. It's like their torque cam.
Okay.
It's been awesome.
Nice.
Awesome. I love it. I love that cam.
So that's one thing I want you to walk us. Like, you're gonna have to walk us through that because I'm not smart enough or don't know enough about like motors and frames and all to walk us through that. But like, obviously, you have to do a ton of the work to take this frame that's not meant for a big M8.
Yeah.
And get this frame in there, but also like with the motor mounts. And I think I saw some photos. You had to figure out how to like mount all like your foot controls and all that kind of stuff. So walk us through as much as you can on like all that stuff you had to do to the frame to actually just make this work.
Sure, I'd love to. Again, shout out to Justin Coleman. He pioneered all this stuff. I'm not the first. I used his work and built on top of it and put my own twist on things. The main challenge when you're trying to fit a motor that's this big compared to an Evo, right? This motor's taller, it's wider. I mean, it's bigger in every dimension. So your main challenge is the underside of the backbone.
Okay.
Since this motor's taller, you do have to remove material the entire length of the backbone.
Okay.
You have to remove that and obviously cap it back off. Fortunately, you know, once the tank and everything's back on, you can't, I mean, you'd have to get on your hands and knees to kind of see what I've done. That's the bulk of the fabrication. Obviously, the stock FXR has a cross member or a couple of cross members. There's one underneath the transmission. I was actually able to leave that one in place. There's the rectangular tubing cross member where normally the mid-control mounts are built off of. You remove that. Another big challenge is the rubber mounts at the front of the frame. These are they're designed in such a way where they kind of interfere with the forward control bosses, you know, on the frame, or where you would typically mount a crash bar or whatever. So you do have to remove material. And I actually made these front motor mounts. It's similar to like what you've seen, like Chopper House, I believe, has done some before, but these are all one-off. It's just made of mild steel, you know, round tubing, and then tabs that are welded on the bottom. But what I'm saying is I reused those forward control mounts or those bosses that are on the frame. But again, it's all custom. I mean, it's a ton of fab work to make all this stuff fit. So if anybody's thinking about trying something like this, go for it. I applaud anybody who tries. And I'm not stingy with info. I'll share everything I know. I have no problems with that.
Nice.
But you better know how to fabricate. And fabricate well, because it's not easy. You
have to know what you're doing when you get in there.
Yeah. And I mean, and well, continuing on the whole frame and fabrication theme, luckily the swing arm from a touring bike happens to mate up with the FXR frame as well.
Okay.
So that's a plus. Harley kept all that stuff consistent over the years. So the dimensions at the rear of your transmission case where a swing arm bolts onto is still the same spacing amongst the years. So I knew that I wanted to run a touring swing arm and these touring wheels, because as soon as I saw these wheels, they just absolutely spoke to me. But the problem was I had never seen anybody do it before, to adapt the touring swing arm to the FXR platform. So you bolt everything together, it bolts up just fine, so it's great. But then when you try to articulate the swing arm runs into the frame. Okay. So it's kind of a bummer. So then, I mean, it's just dynamic problem solving, right? You're presented with a problem, come up with a solution, move on to the next thing. So what was your solution for that? Okay, so the part where the swing arm was hitting the frame was the sides. The sides of the swing arm in its factory form tend to bulge out more. Okay. So when you articulate the swing arm up and down, it was hitting the rear of the triangle. Okay. So what I did is I cut almost that entire side of the swing arm. Okay. Cut all that stuff off to where now you could articulate the swing arm, not have any interference problems, and then made all new metal to cap the sides off. But to do so in a way where it looks stock. Okay. Right? To pay homage to the factory. You know, yes, it was a lot of work, but again, I want things to look stock. That was actually a question I had for you. I meant to start off with, but like I got ahead of myself.
But I think you mentioned earlier one of your big goals with this bike was to make it look as OEM as possible, correct?
Absolutely. That was my goal. Again, I'm not the first person to do this. There actually have been 2 or 3 other people who have built M8 FXRs since that first one that we mentioned. But most of the ones that have been done before were super, super high end. I'm talking big budget bikes. Billet everything, God knows how much money in the suspension, and that's not me. I wanted to approach this from a working man's perspective. To show that you can still build something cool with OEM parts, make it look stock, and you don't have that great of a financial investment. I want to bring fabrication back to this game. Because of my chopper background, the fabrication background, it's something that I wanted to express myself through this platform. Because I mean, quite honestly, the performance game, the FXR game, it's mostly bolt-on stuff. And that's fine, because not everybody knows how to fabricate. And that's fine. I can appreciate that. But for me, since I have fabrication skills, it kind of opens up new possibilities.
Yeah.
So because of that, I said, you know what? I'm going to take parts. This is the antithesis of a show bike, all right? This is parts that people would normally take off and scrap. This is the stuff that I want to use to actually show that, hey, you can make it cool.
Yeah.
You can take that swing arm that most people are going to take off and put on a $2,500 billet swing arm. Just sprinkle a little bit of sole on it, and look, you got something that is still pretty cool, and it works great.
100%.
So, and that theme continues throughout the entire bike. I mean, from, the exhaust, believe it or not, the exhaust starts off, some of it's OEM. The headers are OEM. The heat shield's OEM. And the reason I did that was because Harley designs their stuff, it fits super, super tight on the motor. I don't want stuff sticking out, because the more the pipes stick out, the more your foot controls have to stick out. I want to keep everything tight together.
Okay.
So anyway, the headers are stock. I made the merge collector. Okay. And then I bought a muffler, I should say, from Cone Engineering. Okay. And I just fabricated a mounting system. So it's not the typical exhaust that you would see on a bike. It's got touches that, hey, where'd you get that? Yeah. Or, you can maybe spot if you got a good eye, like, hey, that's some OEM parts. Yeah. But again, if you massage them in a certain way, you get something that's completely unique.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. And because the pipes or the headers are so tight to the bike, I was able to then fabricate my mid controls, like I just mentioned, and keep those tight to the bike. So the mid controls are they're actually a combination of a bunch of different stuff. Okay. The first thing that you could probably see is I'm not using pegs. I'm using passenger boards from a touring bike, from a modern touring bike, passenger boards. But those are mounted to the bike via dyno foot peg mounts. Okay. So again, it's not rocket science. A little chopping, a little welding, boom, you've got a floorboard to a dyno mount, no problem. Then, as far as figuring out the whole pedal situation, I used a touring pedal and a touring master cylinder, and I just built the linkage and actually flipped a touring master cylinder, which is normally towards the front of the control. I flipped it backwards and put it behind and tucked it behind the pipe. Okay. Again, this is kind of stuff from my chopper days, right? Yeah. Hide stuff, keep it clean. And just came up with something unique, something one-off. Nobody else is going to have something like this. And again, it allows me to express creativity and build something unique. Yeah, that's awesome that you're still, like, for the most part, making all these OEM parts work for this FXR platform and doing unique stuff with it to where it's still bringing all this OEM stuff together. Yeah. And I think I overheard you talking to somebody actually at Born Free a couple weeks ago about this. You still try. I know you mentioned you had to bring a lot of the air cooled stuff into the M8, but you still brought a lot of that technology over, like EFI and all that stuff as well. Yes. Correct? Yeah, absolutely. It was important to me. Again, I want to take this platform to a new level. I don't want to just go back and put everything like it was before and dumb down the M8 with a carburetor. I mean, I built a lot of bikes with carburetors, and they're great and all, But why not take advantage of all the modern technology that we have today? And this will allow me, if I ever need to bring my bike into a dealer, I've got all the stock wiring harness, ECM, BCM, all from that factory bike.
Okay.
That Geezer Glide that I bought, that it came with, is all still on this bike. So you could hook it up to a computer, and it still looks like a factory Harley-Davidson, even though its outer layer, its skin, is very, very different. But yeah, to expand upon the whole wiring harness deal, I don't know if you realize how many wires are on a modern bagger.
A lot. We a couple months ago we had my bagger on that lift right there, completely apart, and it was it's overwhelming, at least for me.
It could probably go to the moon and back if you stretch it out. I mean, it's crazy how many wires are on there. So again, I knew I wanted to make it all work, and it's kind of like shoving 10 pounds of crap in a 5-pound bag.
Mm-hmm.
So to be able to fit all that stuff under the seat was a challenge. So first off, I guess the first order of business was to take that wiring harness and start pruning the stuff that I wasn't going to use. That stock Geezer Glide had all kind of crap that I had no intentions of using. I don't have the radio. I don't have the CB module. I don't have coolant pumps and fans, cooling fans and all that stuff. It's just about simplifying and bringing this thing down to its most basic level. So with that being said, even though the wiring harness was pruned down significantly, you still have a lot of wires to contend with. And where am I going to hide all that stuff? So you have to hide it all up in the backbone. At least that's what I chose to do. So underneath the seat, towards the front of that, or the rear of the backbone, I just made a big port, routed all of that wiring through the backbone. Some of it exits, above the motor. Some of it exits to the right. Some of it exits to the left to come up to the fairing. But again, I want things to be super clean. That's kind of one thing I was known for in the chopper world, is keeping everything super clean and sanitary, hiding as much as possible. You can't really see wires and that sort of thing. So I just wanted that old, part of my old world, that chopper world, to be translated into this new platform.
That makes a lot of sense. You're making all these OEM parts work to make it look OEM, but you're also cleaning it up and highlighting his wires, and in essence making it look like it came from the factory, and it's like super clean. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's proven to be great. It really performs well. For somebody coming from 65 horsepower Evos for most of my builds, this is a monster. This is a monster of a bike. And this is, like, in my mind, this is the pinnacle of Harley-Davidson drivetrains. This is something that's far superior to anything else that I've ridden before. All the Evos, twin cams that I've done, this is on another level.
I think in terms of like some of the numbers you see M8 putting out, I mean, I don't think there's even an argument against that. Like,
I think a lot of that comes from the heads, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you double the number of valves, and now an engine's an air pump. Taking air in, pumping it out. And in return, yeehaw. You get a lot of fun.
Do you know what you're pushing out of this?
I haven't dynoed it yet. We're going to do that this winter. My buddy, Tom Talamontes, who was kind of like the electrical guru behind this whole project. Because listen, I don't have a lot of experience with, well, first off, this is my first M8. I knew nothing about this platform. And then all that wiring and all that was completely overwhelming. It took hours and hours of me studying wiring diagrams and figuring out what I could effectively chop off and prune. But then again, to make all that work, I had to rely on my buddy Tom, because he works over at Harley, at Maverick Harley in Dallas. And he had to basically go into the BCM. They've got software that can go in and say, hey, ABS, we don't have that anymore. And go down the list and say, these are the things that we're removing. It's not going to throw trouble codes or dash alerts on the gauges. So he was very integral in making all of this work. So
was this maybe a little lack of knowledge on my part? When did the CAN bus come out with the M8s, or did you have that on this to where it's all like?
This is all CAN bus, but CAN bus came earlier. I think CAN bus might have came out in the twin cam days during that Rushmore thing. I think. But the thing is, the CAN bus isn't as intimidating as people make it sound. And by the way, not everything runs on CAN bus. Your hand controls, those switch packs and all that, that's CAN bus. And a few other things, but not everything is. Are you familiar with how CAN bus works?
Yeah, somewhat. I know it's in essence like a big circuit system, and if there's a break anywhere in that system, like the whole thing just says "I'm done here" kind of deal.
Kinda. It's based on impedance, resistance,
Okay.
right? So the CAN bus circuit looks for changes in impedance, so changes in resistance. It knows that if you hit a button to turn on your right signal, oh, I saw an impedance change in 80 ohms, that must mean that's a right turn signal he clicked.
Okay.
And therefore the BCM takes that information and turns your right signal on. Same thing, you turn on your your key switch or whatever, it knows, oh, that thing is 200 ohms, that other switch has an assignment of 140 ohms or whatever. So it's pretty cool. It greatly simplifies the wiring that goes up to your bars.
Okay.
Because in the old days before CAN bus, you had a lot of 12-volt wires going up in there, and it was more of a pain to hide your wiring in the bars and that sort of thing. But I'm a fan. I really am a fan. Now that I've done it once, it's pretty cool. Okay,
yeah, like I said, I know very little about like wiring, and my first kind of getting into that when we were tearing the bike down. I know we kind of took some stuff off of mine that I was trying to kind of eliminate some stuff that I didn't care about, like the radio and like I put gauges up there and pulling the speakers out and stuff like that. I know when we first cut mine back on, it was like a Christmas tree up there with like warning lights. And
I think
we'd tweaked a couple of wires in there with my like going up to my one of my housings or whatever, and so the thing wouldn't even start. So I had a little bit of experience with that, but it was all way over my head. So,
yeah. Well, that's where when you got a buddy like mine, like Tom.
Yeah.
Tom, help me out. What do I do? And he really saved the day and made all this stuff work together. And because of having a friend like him, I'm able to leverage all the modern conveniences of the touring platform into this bike. So you may have hinted at it earlier. I don't have a key. I have a fob. So based on proximity, I don't have to go dangling with a key or anything. So just based on my proximity, I could turn on the bike. I've got electronic cruise control.
Nice.
All the things that you guys have in your modern baggers, this old girl's got it too. Yeah.
Nice, without like some of that stuff you really don't need in terms of all like the radios and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Very nice.
It's great, man. I don't know how I'm ever going to go back to riding something older than an M8. I mean, this is a game changer for me. This thing has like completely woken me up. It's lit a spark in me. I mean, this is just the beginning. This is not going to be this one bike that I build and then I'm done. I'm already thinking about the next one. I'm already purchasing parts for the next one.
Okay, that was a question I was going to have for you a little later, but let's go ahead and hit that. So you've obviously, this is number 24, and you're constantly on that next thing, and you mentioned this platform. So what's your plan for your next one?
So I do want to be known as the M8 FXR guy.
Okay.
Like I want that to be my niche for now. You see a lot of this stuff in the hot rod world, in the car world. There's resto mods. You don't see it so much, I guess, in the Harley world.
Yeah, that's true.
I want to be that guy.
Okay.
Because I think there's a clientele out there who can appreciate stuff like this, who still likes the vintage look and wants something a little bit different from everybody else. Anybody can go and write a check. Anybody can go and finance a bike from Harley-Davidson. That's not good enough for me. I want something that's truly, truly custom. So I don't want to just keep building this bike. I want to try new ideas with every build. I mean, I've told several, this is no secret, I've told several people. The new fairing on the Lowrider ST, I want to see how that looks on the FXR platform.
Okay, yeah.
In my mind's eye, it works.
Yeah.
It may not. I may put it on and think, okay, this was a huge mistake. But there's new things I want to try. I have no desire whatsoever to build the same bike over and over. I want to express creativity and new ideas with every build, and I do want to take this platform, the greatest platform ever built, and take it to the modern era.
Cool. Well, let's jump back into this. So, as you were rolling in today, I said I love this blue off this bike, but you've obviously got like your FXR fairing, you got the black with your little. Is that your official logo? Or is that just some artwork you like?
No, that's my official logo. Okay. Yeah.
Kind of walk us through like the whole paint scheme and look you had with this, bringing it together. Sure.
So first off, all the plastic, my fairing, my clamshells, this is all original stuff. This is original stuff from the early 80s.
Okay.
Shout out to FXR Mike, who really hooked me up and made a good deal on me with me for like the clamshells, the sheet metal, or the gas tank. Okay, but back to the paint. So,
feel free to include like I guess where these came from as well. Like, just like make that all one big thing. Yeah.
Sure. So the clamshells and the tank I got from FXR Mike and a lot of other stuff I just pieced together. Again, these parts were scattered to the wind all over the country. So I can tell some people were kind of annoyed by the fact that I was chopping something sacred, right? Starting with a factory frame. People don't like to see any type of material being removed from those. So I understand where they're coming from. I'm kind of a purist too in a way. But I'm not taking an original bike and parting it out. I'm taking stuff that's parting out and bringing it back together again. So that's exactly what I did. So once I had gathered all those parts together again, it was just a matter of making it all fit. One of the biggest fitment problems was like the rear fender.
Okay.
Because I wanted to run that swing arm, that wide 180 millimeter rear wheel. Well, how are you going to make that wheel fit inside that fender? So you have to start addressing the rear of the frame. The frame needs material removed. You know, the two frame horns, tubes, you have to section those. I basically cut them in half and added more mat. Whatever material I removed from the inside, I moved and made spaces for the outside. Okay. But you box all that in, so it's still strong as hell. It's crazy. But, you know, you widen the fender, make that fit. Same thing in the front. The front end, the front end, I should say, this is actually a dyno front end. Okay. This is all mid-glide dyno, 49 millimeter.
Okay.
My whole fork assemblies are dyno Lowrider S. My trees are dyno Super Glide. My fender is dyno as well, but again, because I got such a big front wheel now compared to stock, you got to widen the fender as well. So again, it's sheet metal skills that I developed over the chopper years.
Nice.
Got that done. And you know, this wheel.
You mentioned the wheels earlier. Were those wheels? You said they were touring wheels, right?
Yeah. These are the ones that came. They were introduced in 2020.
Okay.
On the road glides, Enforcer 2s.
Okay.
First year running an 18-inch rear. 18-inch rear is a game changer. 16s just don't have the same effect. The 18 just hits so hard. You know, it's.
Yeah, I feel like you see there are a ton of people like trying to switch over to 18s. Well, pretty much everything these days, which is a good thing. I think we just recently went to 18 on Emma's bike. I think it was 17, 16. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
we just switched it.
I think it's 17-inch rear. She has a dyno, right?
Yeah, 17.
I think it's 17-inch rear. Yeah.
And we switched the Nest and went 18. And you just see a lot of people like looking for like 18s or whatever for pretty much anything. Yeah.
There's something about an 18-inch rear, just opening that space up. It's a more modern look, right? I mean, listen, I like all the factory stuff as well, the OEM FXR stuff. It's great. But again, I want to take this to the modern day proportions. Instead of skinny, tires and super thin fork tubes and that sort of thing, let's bring it to the modern day. So that's why I went with these things. It's a challenge to make it all work. You have to know how to fabricate, but it's just math, man. It's removing stuff here, adding stuff there. I'm not curing cancer here. It's just machining and welding and fabrication. And then once everything was all done, to get back to your original question about paint, shout out to Chris Frazier, CF Designs in Oklahoma. He handled all the paint for me. Picking a color was kind of difficult. I went back and forth on what I was going to do. I knew that I wanted something that paid homage to the original FXRT. Like these body lines, the factory pinstripe lines, that's like absolutely non-negotiable for me. Have to have it. So I was very, very strict about that sort of thing. Because again, it plays into the theme of wanting it to look stock. I want people to walk by this and not even pay attention. Okay, it's a blue 87, But the color itself is a current color on the touring bikes. Reef blue from Harley-Davidson. Okay. Yeah. So I saw it in the dealership and I was inspired by it. I said, yep, and I'm going to continue with the OEM theme. Let's go with an OEM color. Okay, but Chris absolutely nailed it. He did the my eagle on the tank is actually that's a water slide decal. Okay. So that's been my brand since I started Maindrive in 05. But yeah, put the Eagle on the tank, my font on the bags. Again, paying homage to the originals where it would have said FXR Touring.
Yep.
But just subtle little adjustments that kind of make it a little bit different from stock, but still pay respect to those original guys who came up with this stuff.
Dude, it's all the blue, and then like you said, like paying homage and keeping that FXR look. It's awesome.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's listen, it's honestly, it's turned out better than I imagined. I'm very, very happy with the bike. It's the most fun I've ever had on a motorcycle. It rides like a dream. You know, my 84 RT, which was mostly stock, it handled well, but there's certain things you get into a corner like a long sweeper, and oh boy, you start feeling a little bit of wobble and stuff. But this has got the modern baggers have a superior system. You've got 4 mounted or 4 rubber mounting points. So it's just, everything is just works so much better than the original stuff.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. And you mentioned obviously doing the 49mm like dyno tubes. Do you have dyno suspension in there, or do you have bagger suspension in there, or what did you do front?
Well, I initially had the stock Lowrider S suspension because I bought these fork assemblies from a Lowrider S.
Okay.
Yeah, somebody was selling. And I didn't realize this, but stock dyno suspension has a cartridge on one side and traditional on the other. It's kind of wild. It didn't really work very well. Front end felt like mashed potatoes.
Yeah.
It's just, it needed something. So when I took my bike to Sturgis, I won Best of Show in the FXR and Dyna show. So I won a gift certificate to Brock's Performance.
Okay.
And I sure as heck, the first thing I bought was
nice.
Cartridges for the front end from Bitubo. And it's been awesome.
Oh yeah, nice. Those, even like the Dyno S, those stock suspension in the front, like I upgraded the suspension all the way around, and when I upgraded the front to like some new cartridges, it was so much better.
Night and day. I didn't really know of anybody who had ran this suspension. I know Bitubo's been around for decades. They've got a bigger presence in Europe. And I was willing to give it a shot. So honestly, I just put them in a few weeks ago. Everything's still at the default settings, and it feels fine.
Yeah,
I could go and get it tuned, and I probably will, just to see what kind of difference it would make if it's done, if it's tuned right for me, for my weight and all that sort of thing. But just putting them in at the default setting, night and day difference from the stock stuff that was in there before. So,
and then I saw did you take the dual disc off of the Lowrider S, or what was that off of?
Well, all this dual disc setup was original to the touring bike.
Okay.
So to make it all fit is a lot of machining. The disc width, the rotor width on the touring bikes is wider than Dyna. It wouldn't even fit in here. The rotors were running into the legs. So then you have to take the wheel. You have to machine material off of those lugs where the rotors normally mount. You got to remove material to make those discs narrower.
Okay.
Yeah. So now you get it to fit, finally barely fit in between the legs. But now the button head fasteners don't clear the legs. So now you got to clearance the legs. You got to do like a little fish mouth, right, to make that fit. Great, get that done. Now you go to bolt on your calipers. They don't line up. So then you have to take the calipers in the milling machine and start removing material to make them line up just dead nuts with the rotors. So it's one thing after another, but it can be done. I mean,
something to work,
I didn't know it could be done. I'm just trying new things, and if it didn't work, well, at least I tried. But you take a few measurements and you examine it like from an engineer standpoint. And you think, well, I don't see why it wouldn't.
Yeah, you can make that work. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah. So, but it stops great.
Cool. We'll work our way up. I guess these are aftermarket bars.
These are aftermarket bars. These are one of the few things. The bars is one of the few things that is actually aftermarket and not OEM. I bought these at a swap meet. They were made by Brian from 4130 Chassis Works.
Okay.
I picked them up raw at a swap meet for next to nothing and just had them chromed. And, still kept the factory controls, switch housing, all that stuff, even mirrors and a lot of OEM stuff going on.
And is your gauge housing, that's OEM from something as well?
The gauges themselves are from a CVO touring bike. the mounting system, the bezel and all that, that's from Justin, my machinist. I got from him. And I just powder coated it with the texture black.
Okay.
And but that kind of, I guess, is a good segue because I wanted to try something new. I didn't want to just put my whole gauge system on the bars like everybody else. You know, the FXRT has this block that's just waiting for you to do something where, you know, people in the old days would have like a tape deck or something in there. So I figured it'd be a perfect opportunity to try something new, mount the gauges up there. So I fabricated a little rubber mounting system, and it's been great. I mean, the FXRT fairing, all that ABS plastic, you know, this isn't fiberglass. This is ABS. That stuff is thick. It's like almost a 1/4 inch thick up there.
Okay.
And it's proven to be really stout, works really well, and I couldn't be happier. And it's just kind of tucked away. When you look at it from the side, you can't see it.
Yeah, it's kind of hidden in there. It looks great. You're not... I get a lot of people put their gauges like on their bars where you can see them better, but I feel like it clutters everything up. So I think it looks great with it being clean and then their gauges tucked away in there, but they're still like easily visible and that kind of deal. Again,
just trying new ideas. Hadn't seen it done before. What does it hurt to try? If it doesn't work, put them on the bars, but you won't know until you give it a shot.
You give it a try.
Yeah.
All right. So Gray just had a great question of like, how hard was it with the motor? I guess jumping back to that and getting the alignment and all right with the motor.
Okay. So basically what I did to make that job as easy as possible was I bought some solid mounts or solid isolators for the rear where those rubber mounts are. What is it? Bad Monkey Motor Works or whatever. It makes some solids. I just use that for mock-up so that there couldn't be any manipulation of the drivetrain to move, you know, to start tipping the front over to the left or to the right. It's just completely locked in. There's no way the whole drivetrain can budge at all. So I temporarily used those solid mounts in the rear, and that let me establish the exact position where the fronts needed to be. Okay. Because you knew it would be dead nuts, straight in line with the bike, not to the right or to the left, but because the rear was solid, that's how I accomplished it.
Okay, there you go. Cool. And then I guess in terms of suspension in the back, are you using like some OEM bagger suspension, or what are you using in the rear? Is it still FXR?
I bought some Öhlins. So when I first started this bike, I knew I'm not going to run stock rear suspension. And I knew I was eventually going to get to the front, but I at least I didn't want to go crazy initially. So these aren't like reservoir, you know, piggybacks or anything like that. It's just the straight up, I don't remember the Öhlins model. I think they're like 13.5 inches. Okay, just the ones with the regular rebound clicks. And
I feel like that makes sense if you're upgrading the FXR with this, obviously it's still OEM, but like the new M8 motor. Like I feel like there are some things that you probably should upgrade aftermarket stuff just because like if you're trying to get it to like that next level and with your ride, like your suspension, and the same thing with your bars and getting your hands in that position.
Absolutely. Kind of you got to get your riding position in such a way that it's comfortable for you. You know, most of the stock bikes, when you sit on a stock bike, they feel ridiculous. Yeah. You know, you'll have your hands in some goofy tiller position and feet here or there. I mean, it's crazy. So that's a good thing about doing something custom. You know, you can get it exactly where you want it to be. And, you know, speaking of riding position, I think that's something that, I mean, it's almost as important as the stance of the bike on its own. You introduce the rider to the bike, and his or her stance on the bike, that needs to flow as well and have I like kind of a muscular stance on the bike. You know, I don't want all this pullback. And so I got it dialed in for me, you know, and it works.
All right, man. So we'll kind of all over the place here, but let's kind of go back, working our way down through parts. So like seat, where's the seat from?
Seat was made by me. Okay. I made my own pan out of sheet metal. Okay. That was a lot of work. I knew that I wanted something kind of classic inspired, but yet, you know, I did want a solo seat, just keep it real clean. So I just hand hammered the seat pan out of steel and then foamed it up, shaped the foam like I wanted. And then I sent the seat pan, or sent the whole seat to my guy in Japan. Backdrop Leathers in Japan. He's done a lot of bikes for me, and I gave him kind of a rough drawing of what I wanted, and he made it happen. And the seat's great. I mean, it's custom. You know, there's not another one like it, and that's the kind of thing that appeals to me, right? It's one of one, but in my opinion, it's got a look that's very timeless. It's classic and modern all at once, and it's not like anything else.
Yeah, it 100% like fits the bike. Like it looks like it belongs there, kind of deal.
I appreciate it. Oh, and I still have the hinge, the factory hinge mechanism, so I can still lift my seat and get to my electronics underneath the seat.
Okay.
So yeah, that was kind of a challenge to fabricate around that hinge system and the latch.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was important to me.
Some of the interviews makes me realize I'm a media guy and not really like don't know that much about motorcycles when it comes to like that in-depth kind of build kind of stuff. So is there anything else? I know we've kind of touched a lot of different random things. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff we haven't covered. Is there anything else that like you want to cover that was something that took a lot of time in terms of like making it work or anything like that?
Well, I think making all this stuff work up front, you know, the voltage regulator, all that factory assembly, you know, for the oh my gosh, what do you call it? The oil cooler, all that kind of stuff. Adapting that stuff from the touring bike to the FXR.
Mm-hmm.
I was lucky at my buddy's dealership. They had a wrecked touring frame.
Okay.
Where they already, you know, they chop the neck off and they'll send it to Harley, get numbers and whatnot. So I was able to rob some tabs off of that frame, the factory tabs for that whole bracketry for the voltage regulator and the lower mount as well for mounting all that factory stuff up to the frame. Again, continuing the OEM theme, making all the OEM stuff work and, you know, making it look more factory than me fabricating tabs and stuff on my own.
Yeah, 100%.
Yep.
Cool, man. You got anything else before I close this out?
Yeah. As a fabricator, as a bike builder, putting all the motor there, what was probably the hardest piece on there to actually, like...
Fabrication-wise?
Not just fabrication-wise, like brain power-wise. So like you had to sit back and be like, okay, the M8 motor, I kind of got an idea how to put it in there. What was like the hardest thing to actually make work?
All of it. This is, again, I built a lot of bikes. This was by far head and shoulders above all of them as far as difficulty level. This was something completely new. This was foreign territory for me, a huge learning curve. To make it all work, the fitment and the fabrication and the electronics and constantly solving problems of how am I going to do this? How am I going to make the swing arm fit? How am I going to make that fender widened? And on and on and on, the whole thing. This is not something that is easy to do. It's not something that people are going to be able to offer a kit to go and do. I mean, you can make this simple. You don't have to go as crazy as I did. You can, if you wanted to, keep the factory swing arm and the factory wheels. You don't have to widen all that stuff like I did or use a dyno front end with touring wheels. Keep all that stuff OEM and just do an M8. You still have to fabricate a lot around the frame, but it would greatly simplify the complexity of the build. But now that I've seen what a 180 millimeter rear wheel looks like, or rear tire looks like in this bike, the factory stuff just doesn't look right to me anymore. I like these modern proportions, and this is how I want to do all of them.
I think with the fairing, because obviously I have the fairing set up on a dyno, it's not a true FXRT fairing, but with the FXR, I think my narrow wide front end looks good because it's naked.
Yeah.
If it had the bulk of the fairing, the lowers and the bags, I think the mid glide front end kind of gives it more of that bulk look to match your tire 180 by having a narrow glide on that.
You're exactly right. You got more visual mass. It's more proportionate to have these types of dimensions on the bike versus the stock stuff. There's nothing wrong with the stock stuff. But if you give me enough time, I'm going to M8 swap all of them.
Not mine.
Just do everything.
What piece on it doesn't actually work the way you want it to? Like from the cruise, the gauges, fuel gauge.
My brother.
Everything?
It all works. It all works. It's great, man.
My fuel gauge does this.
Nope. No, it worked. I mean, well, one thing we haven't talked about is how to make fuel injection work on a OEM tank. So you have to put a fuel pump in there somehow. And the way that most people choose to do it is we put a Sportster fuel pump in the bottom.
Okay.
So you get a Sportster fuel pump mounting flange. You cut a big hole on the the left side, underside of the tank. Weld that flange in, and it works great. Yeah, Sportster fuel pump.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then you get the circle diameter intake on there to give it that little look?
Oh yeah, so the air cleaner is a lie. That proved to be a lie, as Maury would say. It says 80 cubic inches.
Yeah,
that's an OEM. That's a super rare air cleaner cover, by the way. You know, the ones that say Sport Glide are not easy to find. But it's just another one of those elements that just contributes to people just walking by and like, hey, okay, another stock bike. Unless you know what you're looking at, then you probably do a double take. But I like that vintage look, and I think it works. You know.
Oh yeah, 100%.
I mean, look, people argue all day long about what's the most the best looking motor that Harley's ever made. You know, most people lean towards knucklehead, panhead. My opinion, my humble opinion, this is the best looking drivetrain ever made. Twin cams do nothing for me. I mean, I like the look of an Evo, but like twin cams are kind of boring and blocky. Mm-hmm. But like I look at the organic shapes on here of like the rocker covers, you know, the rocker box design, the cam chest cover, all these organic shapes, and it looks beefy, it looks muscular. Best looking drivetrain to me. Shout out to Harley-Davidson. I want to see the motor company succeed. I want them to be around forever. I personally am not a fan of the new direction with, you know, bikes with radiators, no push rods. It's not my kind of thing at all. This is Harley's roots, air-cooled V-twins, and I think this is the pinnacle of air-cooled V-twin performance, and I'm glad to be around for it.
Cool. Yeah. I think hopefully they'll keep both. Obviously, like the Rev Max motor, all that stuff. I mean, hopefully they'll have maybe in essence 2 lines now. But I mean, because they definitely can't just get away from like air cooled stuff with like their market right now. I feel like that's going to be tough. Or somebody else is going to have to. It's going to open up a big gap in the market for somebody else to fill that. So I'm not sure what's going to happen there. But yeah.
I don't know what's going to happen either. I feel like the new stuff is too. It's kind of like glorified V-rod design. It's just it doesn't have the same soul. The exhaust note, the vibration, it just nothing feels the same. This is what put Harley on the map. This is what has kept them alive for over 100 years. Is this feeling, you know? And it's a happy combination in my mind of the vintage nostalgia and all the modern performance. So you can you don't have to be putting around at 45, 50 miles an hour like the old stuff was. You know, when national speed limit was 55. You know, we're past those days, and these bikes perform amazingly. I mean, everything is so smooth. I find myself going 95 miles an hour everywhere. Like, I need to slow down, you know, because these you just don't notice. The bike feels bored. Bike's like, this is all you got? You know, that's just a compliment to the engineers and the team at Harley-Davidson that put this drivetrain together. Bravo.
Yeah, 100%. So.
I mean, sorry, my pet cricket talking to you right now.
You won't hear the cricket.
But question for the beginner fabbers that started off from your 25 bikes, what would it be to build? You didn't start with this. You started with what would be the first thing from a young guy that wants to keep your kind of heritage thought process of building, like what would be the first thing skill you would tell them to learn from like what first machine to buy, like fabrication, like what would be that would be like you would have had to say something to inspire the young 20-year-old you. What would be the first thing to say to get this way? I would start with this thing.
That's a very insightful question, Grady. Honestly, you.
I'm serious. I'm not saying that in a negative way.
That's a really good question.
Dude,
I mean, honestly, the approach that I took was an incremental approach. I didn't go hog wild and start buying all kinds of equipment. You don't need to start with a milling machine and a lathe and all that sort of stuff. Everything I did was incremental. And I think that is the best approach. I say this all the time, but 2 of the most common tools that I use for every bike that I build are my 2 4.5-inch grinders, one with a cutoff wheel and one with a flap disc. I build almost everything with that. If you have a way to envision an idea, but you just don't have a way to execute it, well, then just figure out what it's going to take to do so. If you just need to buy simple tools, maybe a basic I would say get a TIG welder. But if you can only afford a MIG, get what you can afford. But you have to start somewhere. We don't come out of the womb knowing this stuff, right? Nobody does. We all start from ground zero. The difference is some of us are hungrier than others. And for me, this was an insatiable passion that could not be quenched, and I wasn't going to stop for anything. So because that hunger and that passion was there, everything subsequently came easy.
Awesome, dude. This is it's been great for me. I mean, this is like a lot of knowledge obviously I don't have, and like the amount of like, you really appreciate the amount of time and effort you went into making this stuff work. That kind of deal. So
well, I appreciate that, because most people would never know the amount of time that it takes to do something like that. You just figure, well, it's just another bike, you know, you bolted together some stuff, but until you talk to the fabricator, you wouldn't know.
Well, I mean, yeah, even like today, obviously I understand. I mean, I know not a builder by any reason. I'm not even really an assembler. I'm a media guy. But I understand, like, obviously when you take a motor, you got all these different mounts and you have all these different pieces that aren't made to work together. They don't just like bolt together. It takes a lot to do that. Yeah. But then actually be able to sit down and talk to you, and you get into detail all the different things you've had to do that I would have never even thought of.
Sure.
It really makes you appreciate the amount of effort that goes into something like this.
Well, again, I'm not stingy. I hope someone seeing this or has seen this bike before finds some level of inspiration or a spark, the same way that my spark was lit, you know, many years ago. So I'm happy to see this platform move on to onward and upward.
So that's a question for you, or something for you. So somebody has a question for you in terms of building one of these. They want you to build one of these, whatever they might want. What's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Instagram, at Maindrive Cycle. It's probably the best way. I also have a website as well, www.maindrivecycle.com.
Thanks for tuning in, guys. Make sure to check Cory out. I'll put all his information in the description. If you got any questions, reach out to him. Put it in the comments. Try and follow up there. Make sure you check out all the sponsors of the video, my site, Patreon, all that kind of deal. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Thanks, Bubba. I appreciate
man.
you.
Thank
you,
dude.
It's an honor, man.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And then I was also going to ask, did motorcycles really used to have tape deck?
Oh yeah.
Really?
Yeah, my previous, that 84 FXRT had the tape deck and everything. Yeah, and these things right here, huge speakers, speaker holes.
Speakers, but I guess in my head I was like,
oh yeah, girl, tape decks.
I mean,
Motley Crue.
They didn't have USBs and shit back then.
well,
Like,
I assumed that back in the day, like there was no like speaker or sound system.
Oh yeah.
That's the way.
It was fully stripped down.
that's the way motorcycles should be.
Yeah.
None of that crap.
I mean, this system that I'm talking about sounded like garbage. I mean, you couldn't hear it at highway speeds or anything, but yeah.
Yeah, that was the first thing I did on that. I was
All
like,
the stuff she
that
cared
all my
about,
like,
take that.
yeah.
She's like, wait a minute, time out, pause this freaking
I don't
interview.
care about anything else. This is take that.
Oh, that's funny.
You got any more questions like that?
Well, no, that. I heard no questions.
Okay, well, give me.
Come on, Grady.
Pick your
Bring
top,
it.
Pick your top
Bring it.
couple.
Huh?
Pick your top.
So obviously, not an FXR, you remove the oil pan. You remove it so you're able to fit all that in there from the battery, obviously, all the stuff inside the triangle. So all that fed back into that perfectly. And the swing arm, obviously, is not the alignment, the belt.
Yeah, I got the belt. All OEM. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, the swing arm, you have to remember, the swing arm comes from the same bike that this whole drivetrain came. So that stuff was meant to work together. By the way, the wheel comes from a touring bike as well. So all that stuff, there's not a lot of engineering and fab that needs to go into it. The only thing I had to do was, if you remember or if you notice, the stock shock mount location on the swing arm is like all the way to the rear.
Yeah.
I chopped it off and moved it forward to match the geometry of the FXR. That's all I did.
Okay.
So yeah, it's nothing too earth-shattering as far as fabrication to make it work.
The earth-shattering I would ask is, obviously you talked about your controls and your foot pegs, and we can't see the other side of the bike getting pictures, but mounting the pegs and
Yeah, I mean, that shifter side for the mid-control was a huge, huge challenge. There was a lot of hours spent in the garage just sitting on a stool staring. Like, God, you got to give me something. I don't know what I'm going to do here. I mean, I could have done the more traditional dyno route, or I could have bored through the whole primary and welded in a tube, you know, and did that whole crossover pivot shaft. I didn't really want to do that. I just, again, working man's perspective, keep it simple. So I use the same concept. I have a dyno foot peg mount with a passenger floorboard, but the whole shifter arm stuff. I took 2 shifters, steel shifters, and just, I mean, you'll see obviously in your pictures, and you know it'll translate on the video, but just took 2 shifters and welded them together in an orientation that just worked.
Okay.
And then take a torch and just bend it over the primary in a real organic way that looks natural, and weld a bung to the end of it and just smooth it all out. Just take some time and sprinkle a little bit of class on it, and it's cool. You know, it works really well.
What's the difference in the size of that powertrain and the original FXR powertrain that's in there?
Well, all the FXRs would have been 80 cubic inches. This is 107. And so I know in the M8 world, that's the small M8. It's plenty fine. It's plenty fine.
In that frame, how much more?
I think the amount of material that I had to remove on the underside of the backbone, you're probably talking about 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch, thereabouts. Yeah. So you're not weakening this thing. You're not making this big square backbone into some like razor thin element. No, it's still beefy as hell, but you just have to remove a little bit of material. And then you have to contend with those hard oil lines, right, over the top of an M8. So you have to do a little bit of clearancing and heating things up and massaging under there to make those lines fit. Those hard oil lines run into the crossover line between the gas tank halves. So you got to do more heating and massaging and banging. But again, a problem presents itself. Just try to come up with the simplest solution to move forward, and then just keep moving forward, scratching things off of the list until you get a running bike.
I imagine that was a pretty big list with fitting that thing in here. So
yeah, I mean, I knew it could be done again because someone had done this pioneering work before me, and it inspired me. So I knew I would have never even thought to try and fit an M8 into an FXR. Like, who the heck even thinks of that? And they did it when the M8 was like brand new. There probably weren't even many wrecked bikes to go buy drivetrains from, or. But because they did it, it lit a spark in me, and I'm not a copycat. You know, I put my own twist. I did a lot of things differently, like, you know, Grady, you were mentioning earlier, like fitting all that stuff under the seat, all that electronics and stuff. Well, what I also did was where the oil tank normally stuck out from under there, I capped it off with a plate. I did it in a kind of different way than it's been done before, and I made a recessed box for the coil, like y'all's stock M8 touring bikes. So I put the coil in a similar location, but it's in its own little recessed box that's like tucked and hidden. And I have you know, holes with rubber grommets where wires or cables do need to exit from that battery or electronics compartment out to various components on the bike.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean, the bottom line is that when you start stripping significant amounts of weight like Justin has, or, I mean, these bikes don't even weigh much to begin with. Yeah, the drivetrain's probably a little bit heavier, but whatever. This thing feels crazy nimble. It's very confidence-inspiring when you ride it. It's got to be the best handling FXR out there, I'm guessing. I don't know. I haven't ridden them all. But it's pretty nice. It's pretty nice.
Yeah, and just the power difference in dropping an M8 and then in a light dyno. Like I get on his, and it's like so much lighter. Even in her dyno, like it's so much lighter. And so dropping a big 107 in that, just the power in something this light, it's just got to be. I mean, pretty intoxicating. And
it's not just the power; it's the way that the power comes on. It's so smooth, and it's so refined. You know, you're not rattling teeth fillings out, and it's
you say that because like his 91 FXR he had built coming to Born Free, he's got an SNS Evo 111 in there.
Oh my.
And it 113.
Oh,
Okay. It'll rattle your brains out. He
my word.
Literally every time he rides it, he breaks something that's on Wayborn free. He broke his front motor mount.
Oh.
The day before we did some photos. Your bolt on your rear shock and your seat bolt came out. So you're talking about like rattling your brains out, like yeah.
And like it's a violent bike, and it's like you have it. You don't have. I don't have a rubber mounted. Mine was obviously solid enough, but then I had bought the Alliart, the polyurethane, like
bushings and
solid bushings bikes. You feel it through your body when you ride it. And then the 113, and I don't have all the bearings and nothing on mine.
I know. That's a raw experience, I bet, riding that bike.
It is a very raw
experience. I think it's definitely different.
This is refined.
Yeah.
You know, I stop, I pull out my Grey Poupon, you know, and
I feel my toenails.
We should,
when I'm on his FXR.
we'll have to get a GoPro. Somebody riding that one, and then you riding this one, and just put them in here. Difference in the vibration.
You can't use the rearview mirrors for cosmetic.
Oh no, none of that over here. Oh no, Grady.
Oh, okay. He's part of the interview now. You can't you hijack him. I know. I'm making a joke. Like you're okay.
I kind of like negative spaces, you know, coming from even like my chopper life. Negative space was everything.
You want your M8 FXR.
Oh, that's a guy on Instagram, GNS Machining or something like that. He does those custom
plates.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all CNC made.
Yeah.
Compared
to like taking a touring when
I got you.
What I wanted. So.
I'd actually like to do one of them.
Yeah.
Again, this is all future ideas for future builds, but I'd like to do a stripped down version as well. Yeah. You know, just take off all this stuff and, oh my God, make it even lighter. It would be ridiculous.
The thing looks kind of from the stock original rubber mounted forwards they had on them. It doesn't look that.
They're like they belong.
Just a little bit higher, you know, a little bit higher, and I don't know. It's just it's a sweet spot for me.
Seen the air cleaner cover when you pull. I was like,
fake you out, man. I tell people this. I had posted on Instagram. I said, I faked y'all all out. Y'all thought this was an M8 in here. This is a Kuryakin cover kit.
It's all fake.
But I think like I mentioned.
But it does. You kept So what part where did you cut it off at?
Yeah, from here.
Okay.
No, from here
so you made
all the way to the front. Yeah, I made it look kind of original.
Yeah.
It normally bulged out to here.
Oh yeah.
And it was bonking into
here. I went
here.
out there and looked at his.
So from here all the way to the front. This is all new metal. Yeah.
Did you have to reinforce on the inside or anything once you actually cut all that off, or was it still plenty strong enough?
I just boxed it off again. It's still the same thickness material that was there before, except instead of being so wide, it's just a little bit narrower.